the Northern Bluegrass Training Coach. And here with me is Candace Torres. She's from Salt River. And our hope today is really for an interactive session where we all learn from each other on some tips and tricks for training planning. And we have some expert trainers that have joined us that we are going to be interviewing. So in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Candace and she will introduce them. Then I'll kind of just frame our session, how it's going to work, and then we'll get moving with our training tips. But we really want this to be an interactive session because when I look at my screen, I see a ton of expertise. You all have expertise, so we're really hoping that we can learn from each other. So now I'll turn it over to Candace to introduce our trainers that have joined us.
Okay. So when we were getting ready to do this, I sent out something. I was like, hey, trainers, who would like to talk? And I had a couple people who were like, okay, I'll talk. And I'm just like, we have so much talent out there. So I want to thank the people who volunteered to talk with us today. So in order of, there's 4, and they are going to share, but we want everyone to share. But this way we just get a couple people that are for sure going to share and we don't have crickets, right? So first off, we have Dawn Griffin. 15 years ago, Dawn started her journey with HDI as a quality coach. She decided to jump to the training coach position, and then one more hop brought her to be where she is now. She's an instructional designer for HDI learning. And although she's not doing like the face-to-face trainings now, but she has so much experience. And where was she? Did she have a life before HDI? She was a childcare teacher and an assistant director. So Dawn, if you could like raise your hand or something. Thanks for being with us today. Where's Dawn? There she is. Okay, she's off mute. All right, so Dawn Griffin. Next we have Tammy Sluter. So Tammy, I actually, real quick, because I'm supposed to only do a couple minutes with this. I met Tammy when I was doing someone else's observation. And I came in to do an observation. I met Tammy. I just met so many awesome people, and we just really connected. So this is what Tammy has said to me. So Tammy's dedicated her life to Head Start for 25 years. She obtained the Master's of Education in Counseling and Human Development, attended UConn to obtain the Family Development Instructor's Credential and the Leadership Instructor's Credential. She's also a bus driver. I didn't know that. She's a Class C CDL bus driver. She was a teacher and then a family advocate and a center manager until she was promoted to be the health and mental health manager. Right now, she's a regulations and safety manager. She has experience from the classroom to the bus. And she's been a credentialed trainer now for 12 years. She specializes in Head Start performance standards, Kentucky child care regulations, and she focuses mostly on safety of the children and staff. Tammy, thanks so much for being with us today. She always like makes me giggle. Okay, Jasmine. Jasmine just jumped in. Thanks, Jasmine. She jumped in. She's like, all right, Candace, I'll talk. I can talk all day. She has her trainer's credential for about 5 years now. She's super duper educated. She has a bachelor's in psychology and in human services and a master's in IECE. And she's worked in the field of early childhood for about 18 years and like all the different things. We don't have to list them because we all know what they are. They're all the different things. She currently works at Head Start in Shelby County. Thanks for joining us, Jasmine. And then last but not least, as Julie Halitska, she's our training coach for Jefferson County. She's a level 5 credentialed trainer. She's our techie coach. She spent time as a full-time web developer and provided higher education classroom AV tech support and helped live stream in-person events weekly for over 3 years. She loves creating high-quality interactive trainings. If you guys have done our Trainers Institute, you probably have seen Julie because she is often on our Trainers Institute as a trainer. She will be training again, right, Julie? Can I say that? Yes. Oh, you're on mute or you're not hearable. Let's see. She is going to be training. So it's not often that our actual trainers do that. She's going to come back and talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
We can't.
Yeah, sorry. I will be training at both our Friday Fun Day and Trainers Institute coming up. So check those out if you don't know what they are.
Yes.
And we'll be
Right.
talking about those at the end too and dropping links in. So
Yes. Thank you so much, Julie. I know you're just really busy because I actually know what all the stuff you're doing. You have such great, memorable trainings. So thanks for, being on the panel. We especially invited her to come do that because she's a training coach who trains a lot. So, all righty. So that probably went over time. Sorry.
that's all right. We're going to talk about timing, and we tried to plan our timing. So let me just very quickly frame how our session will work. We're going to share some tips and tricks for training planning, and we're going to share them one tip at a time. For each tip, I will share a couple of slides very quickly. There will be some resources sometimes that I'm dropping in the chat, but then I'll stop sharing so that we can all see each other, and Candace will interview our expert trainers. But we also, for each tip, want to hear your questions and ideas as well. We really tried when we were putting our content together to look at what you all told us on the Qualtrics survey when you registered, and we really use that to narrow our content. So if there's something that you have a question about or something we didn't cover, please put it in the chat or go ahead and unmute. So I'm gonna get started. Let me share my screen. And are you all seeing now the tips and tricks for training planning screen? Okay, let's get going. Our first tip is for training planning is just to have one. Take the time to make a plan in a format that works for you. Using a training plan makes it much more likely that you're going to plan all the different parts of your trainings that are needed to really help your learners retain the material and use it. A training plan helps you be organized, gather all the materials and links and things like that you need. And it also helps you plan the timing for your trainings. And that was something that a number of you said on the Qualtrics survey is a challenge, figuring out timing, staying on timing, kind of fitting it all in. Now, if you were in FET, you may remember that we have a training plan format that we really like. And it is a great format, but there are other formats that work too. And really the key for training planning is to find a format that works for you and for your style. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to very quickly show you some different format options that you might use. I will be dropping these resources in the chat as well. And then once we've looked at these slides, I'll stop sharing and we will hear from you all. Okay, so this probably looks familiar, this first. Are you seeing the training plan? Oh, perfect. This is the FET training plan that we use. It's especially good for synchronous training. So if you're planning face-to-face or a live webinar, but what we like about it is it's got the 3 sections of the training plan. It's got space for your training activities. For each activity, you can list your training aids, and then it's got the time as well. So we do like this format. I'll drop it in the chat. We also know that some of you do asynchronous trainings, either on demand or independent studies. And we also have a training plan format that Julie and Dawn developed for FET 380 that is especially good for asynchronous trainings. And again, it still has the different parts and it has the time expectations, but this might be a format that works for you. Some people are very visual thinkers and visual learners. And if you are, a mind map might be a resource that helps you plan. And this is actually a mind map of our FET planning form, but you'll notice it's got the 3 sections, it's got the time, and then it's got space to put the different activities for each section. There are some apps that have some free options where you could create a mind map if you like it. And one thing, it's really nice that it kind of allows you to visualize everything and move the pieces around if you want. If you're artistic, you could also draw your own, but I will be dropping those links into the chat. This is a very cool tool from the Bob Pike Group. This is an Excel, they call it a quick timing flow, and they use this in addition to their training plan, but they find that this really helps them to stay on track. And what it does is it allows you, you just enter the start time And then you can list your activities and the time, and it allows you to very quickly adjust timings and see how it impacts your overall time. So some of you mentioned that staying on time and planning timings can be challenging. So this might be something that you would like to use. I will be dropping this resource as well.
That's what,
All right. Then finally, there are some old school planning tools that can still be helpful. So they're shown on this screen. There is a national presenter who loves to use colored pens, and they find that helps their brain. They use a different color pen for each section of their training plan, and they just find that really kind of helps them. And then another tool that to mention, your calendar is a tool. Some of you talked about, because I know how busy you all are, and some of you mentioned that just finding the time to do a training plan can be really challenging, or getting started. So something that can help, and it sounds kind of silly, but if you just block off some time to do that plan, that can help you. And if you're having trouble getting started, try blocking off like 15 minutes and just do as much as you can in 15 minutes, and that can help you get moving. And now I will stop sharing and I will turn things over to Candace to interview our trainers.
Okay, so I want everyone to know that I didn't give the trainers specific, or all of you are trainers, I didn't give you specific, questions. So anyone can jump in here, whether you're on our panel or not. So the first question that I really have is, what is your process for creating your plan right after you find out you're doing a training? So like, Tammy, could you make a training on XYZ? Like, what's the first thing that you do? And not that I mean to call you out. I just saw your picture there. So, but what do you do when you're like, you have to do a training? Oh, and by the way, it's in a month.
Well, the first thing I want to do is research on a topic, especially if I don't know a whole lot about the topic. I'm going to do research.
Okay.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that what you, Julie, is that what you do first? You just got to figure it out?
Yeah, because even if I know a lot about a topic, I also want to make sure what I know is true in research and backed up by research, and not just my opinion, because I don't want to teach other people my opinion. So yeah, I normally start with research, and I probably over research more than I'm going to actually use, but that's where I start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I said I'll research as well and just have like a Word document where I have like all of like the websites or the links to whatever it is that I'm looking up. So that way later on when I'm like, what did I look at? Because I looked at like 16 things but I also make sure, I mean, mommy blogs can be fun and give you some useful information, but I always try to make sure that I also get things from reputable resources. Since I'm a UK staff, I have access to the UK library. So check and see, like you might have access to like online journals and stuff like that to get more peer-reviewed fancy things. So.
Okay.
Because of the way that I plan trainings, I typically start by figuring out exactly who my audience is before I plan the training, because I need to know how in-depth or low-key I need to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of gives me some parameters, because I will go into a research rabbit hole myself.
So you kind of need to know if you're doing like a level 1 training, or, if you're going to be doing like a level 4 training. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Also, I tend to do them with cohesive groups. So I like to know if it's a ton of like brand new employees, or, people who have been around and worked with each other for a long time. Those sorts of things alter the dynamic of how I plan my trainings.
Okay. So, I mean, this is kind of on here, but you're making me have questions as I'm listening to you guys. So what tools do you use? One of you said that you make a documents. Like, what are the tools you use to like gather all that information up?
I use a Word document primarily. I just make a Word document. I have grown to love headings and the amazingness of headings. So if you ever want to have a love conversation about headings, just let me know. And it's really nice because you can quickly jump to things, and then you can also within the headings move things around. So if you're like, I don't like this in this spot, you just drag all that content and you don't have to worry about copying and pasting. And then it does take time. The vast majority of my trainings are all online, and it does take a lot of additional time to do it, but it makes it easier for uploading. And then if I ever need that information again, or say the system crashes and the training disappears, I have a document that has all of that content in there, so it's easier to recreate if needed.
Okay. How about, okay, so let's say you've got all your planning, you've got your information now, so that you know it's not just your opinion. That was a good point. What plans do you guys use before we move on? Like, what is your plan? Do you use the mind map, or do you use like what we provided? Like, do you guys have something different?
I'm laughing because Dawn knows I kind of just start in and move the pieces and parts around as I create it, but I always have paces in my head. Like, I don't have it written down, but I'm always going by paces. So what's my preview and what are my content exercise pairs? But I do jump right in generally, especially with online trainings. It's a little easier to just reorder the pieces and parts sometimes than it is for face-to-face. But in PowerPoint, you can move your slides around. So I'm more abstract.
Okay.
I tend to lay mine out similar to like an outline for an essay or something like that. I kind of have like my major themes, and then, you know, points beneath that. And then once I get a general order in my head, then I start really plugging in content.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question about Mary?
Bethany said she needs and uses an outline. is what she said.
Okay. All right. I think I'm just going to go ahead and go on to tip 2 right now, Sharon.
Yeah, that's
For
fine.
time's sake. Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a question from some of
Okay.
our other trainers. Is there a training planning format that any of you use, or any tips? Because we shared some of the resources that you might use. Because most of you said you do training planning in some form. So just curious what works for you all.
I don't use a formal plan of any kind because my mind is kind of chaotic and messy. And those neat little boxes are too structured for me.
So
How about,
is yours
sorry, go
more of
ahead.
a mind map then? Is it more of like a mind map that you're following? It's because not everyone likes the little boxes, but like the mind map is like, okay, this is my, like Julie said, this is my part where I'm content exercise.
I'm gonna agree with everyone that has spoken up honestly, and so I'm gonna do that as well, and honestly say that I've got it all jumbled up here, and then I just go to work on my PowerPoint. I would like to be more organized. If I were more organized, I'm not sure that it would benefit me because that's my personality. Does that make sense? I just like to, okay, I'm going to do a training on hand washing. Let me just get started and just keep going. I think because I'm a little bit hyper. I don't know. Does that make sense? Does anybody else have that issue? Like you're hyper and you just want to get to it and you just start doing it.
I think a lot of people, like Bethany's Potter's nodding, I think a lot of people just want to get started, get to it. And it really depends on your personality and your ability to stay with it. Personally, I would forget something. It's just how I am. Like I would forget an important piece if I couldn't check off that I had gone down that piece, but not everyone's like that. So, yeah.
I wish I could be more like that, but I will.
It's because I'm so scattered that I need to have that.
And Dawn says her beginnings of a training are just a jumbled idea of words, phrases, jumbled mess of words, phrases, and ideas. And yeah, really, I mean, any of you all know me, I am more organized and linear. So I definitely like a written plan. I especially like it for the timing to help me kind of stay on track. But like we said, there's no one way to do it. As long as you're getting all of the different parts in there, like Julie mentioned, with paces and things to make sure the training is impactful. Well, let me share. We'll move on then to our second tip. And let's see if we can share again. All right. So our first tip was to have a training plan. And our second tip is to dial it in, really focus. One of you in your the Qualtrics survey, you said, think about what is the big takeaway. And so you really want to focus your content on what is that workplace outcome and what's the reason for the training. And we heard from you all that this can be tricky, particularly if you do a needs assessment. A lot of times a director will want you to cover 10 things in a training when there's really just not time. So this on this slide, it shows some of what you actually shared with us about kind of how hard it is to narrow things down. So we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but a couple tips. First of all, if you really focus on what do you want your workplace outcome to be, that can really help. And we talk about go an inch wide and a mile deep. So you're far better off to have, it's okay to narrow your content versus a needs assessment, because you'd really rather have your learners learn something and go back to their workplace and use it and make that change than be exposed to 10 things that they're going to forget or not be able to use. So focus on what do you want that workplace outcome to be? What's your key priority? That can really help you dial it in when you're planning. Another thing that can be helpful is to think about your information. Is it a need to know or is it a nice to know? And if it's a nice to know, you can include it as an optional resource, but it doesn't need to be a part of your training. And then the other thing is just going back to that timing. If you are planning timing for each activity and in some form, that'll help you realize, am I jamming way too much content in here for a 2-hour training? So those are just some tips to think about, ways to dial it in. And now I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Candace, and we'll hear from you all.
Yeah. So I have a question. And I wrote these questions down and then I'm listening to y'all. And so they're morphing a little. So I hope I'm not going to throw off the trainers. So you said that everyone said that they like dive deep and do their research, so that you're giving good information. And so now you have kind of your assignment to train on X, Y, or Z, and you've done your deep dive, which I know deep dives. I'm a deep diver myself. How do you narrow that down and really dig into what's the most important thing to share in that hour or that 2 hours? Like you have your workplace outcome, like Sharon just explained, but how do you really decide I'm going to share this, this, and this?
I think through it more in terms of what's on the training plan worksheet more than the training plan itself, because that really has what's your title, what's your description, what's your main objectives, what's the training workplace outcome and the training outcomes. And if you think through it that way and kind of just use that as your frame, no matter what you do afterwards, that can focus you even if you're not doing a whole training plan. And so I think and also when you go to put it into TRIS, if you use that, you have everything TRIS is going to ask you pretty much on that sheet too. So I do use that and think through it that way, even if I haven't written it out.
Right. That's a good point, Julie. And I don't know if we had that ready to drop in the resource, but we can add that later, which is that the training plan what is it called again? I should know. My brain is.
It's in there, the FET training plan.
Yeah. The training plan, but then the planning sheet.
But the worksheet, the training plan.
Oh,
worksheet,
the training
plan
plan
itself, but the
worksheet.
worksheet. Yeah.
So, because even if you don't have the plan, the worksheet is helping Julie just stay focused. I think that's really good. It's a good point. Did any of you, Jasmine, Dawn, or Tammy, do you have anything to input on that?
I mean, just picking and choosing what is most important. Online is a little bit different in some ways, but I'll do a lot with my online. Like if it's something that I'm like, oh, I could just get down in the rabbit hole of telling people like nerd out on stuff and just go for hours on something, I'll attach it like as links. So like if you want to learn more, here are these articles, here's this website, here's this video. So it's not necessarily a required thing. They've gotten all the information that is necessary for the training, but I've got like loads of other stuff that I'd be happy to share with them. And so putting that stuff in as more of like the resources and like the optional stuff.
Okay, so it helps you to feel like I don't have all this information that I can't share. Yeah, I totally nerd out on stuff too. Christine will give me something to do and I'll go like way deep, like it's a 10-minute thing. And I'm like, a day later, I come back with all this stuff. So I totally get it. That's why maybe why I asked the question. How about Jasmine and Tammy? What do you guys do?
I, if I have to decide which portion of information to include, I include what's most relatable to me in the field, because all of the topics and things that we talk about can often be related to other fields and in other ways, but I try to pick the information that's most appropriate for being used in the classroom or, in early childhood education.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question on how to narrow down topics or how to give back what we're being asked?
I just have a comment.
Sure.
So I don't do as much online training, but what Dawn was talking about, where she kind of adds like links where people can go further, we do that in our follow-up email. After our face-to-face training, we always send a follow-up email to, whoever we were in contact with. And it has a links sheet attached to the follow-up email that has, because KET uses PBS Learning Media for a lot of our resources, and there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of resources in there, and we couldn't possibly fit, all of that into a training. So we usually will choose several collections of resources from PBS Learning Media and attach it to a links sheet so that people can go further, look more, find other things. And we always tell them, we're just going to show you a glimpse and then we'll give you resources later for you to look through on your own. So, and people really love those link sheets, and we usually get lots of emails back to us asking questions about some of those resources too. So I think that a follow-up email with those links really works so that you don't have to try to cram everything into a small period of time.
Thank you, Emily. That's a good point. Yeah.
I love that idea too, because it almost serves as a learning boost then. It kind of reinforces the content for them.
Yeah. You can even schedule those ahead of time. You can do a planned email and schedule them. I know a couple people on this call are very good at planning their emails and scheduling them out. So, that's a really good idea.
Yep.
Now this question is not on there, but I know you'll be able to speak to it. What do we do when the question is, you've narrowed down what you're going to talk about. You've made sure that it meets your outcomes and all of your needs and those things. Just jumping back to the training plan just a little bit, how do you make sure that you stay on time with those things for these trainers? Like, how are you staying on time? Now you figured out what you're going to say, you've done the research. How are you going to stay on time with it?
One way that I stay on time is when I plan activities, I intentionally plan a little bit more time for the activity itself than the activity should take. And that way, if I get a little off track or we get on a question tangent or something like that, by the next activity, I can get myself back on track.
Tammy, you're nodding. That's what you do too?
Sorry about that. Also using a timer, or a shaker to bring the audience back. I've seen those, they're like gourds, they have seeds in them and you know, use a shaker. Music or a symbol,
Yeah, those are good ideas.
that-
I'm Sharon and I are so alike that like I actually look at the time when we're doing FET. Those of you who've been in FET recently, like Sharon and I are the ones looking at the time, like, oh, we're 4 minutes over. Oh, we're 3 minutes behind. Or oh, we're the two of us are always looking at the timing. That's why I just asked you guys, like, how do you make sure that you're like on time with things? So
And Danita has said also use a timer, but use a colleague. She's a great suggestion.
use a colleague because yeah, you get going and yeah, you might go too long. All right. Do you want to go to tip 3, Sharon? Do you want to wrap this
Sure,
one up?
let's go to, and just to frame it for you all, we have 4 tips and then we'll wrap up. So we're halfway done and then we've got 2 more tips. But great participation so far. So let me move to tip 3. All right. And tip 3 is really just when you're doing your planning, you've got your training plan form, you dialed it in, but remember the importance of your opening and closing as well. I think it's very easy. We're also passionate about what we do and we're all very knowledgeable. It's very easy to jump right into that content. But there are a couple pieces in particular that we want to remind you about with the opening and closing. So in the opening, first of all, because people are pretty good about previewing the training, they'll talk about what they're going to cover. You want to remember also to plan something to activate prior knowledge for your learners. And some of you talked about a challenge being sometimes people don't really want to be there. They're not necessarily that engaged. Sometimes you have different levels of expertise in the same training, and that can be kind of a challenge to navigate. So if you can have an engaging activity that activates their prior knowledge and involves them, because adult learners love to be involved, that can be very helpful. It's an important part of your opening planning. And then also obviously creating emotional safety and connection. We call that connection to content, having some activities that do that. I don't know if you noticed when you came in, we had the Slido poll where you could share a favorite training activity that kind of activated prior knowledge and got everybody thinking about it. Then coming down to the bottom in the pink is the summary. And that's a really important part of your closing. And that's where you have an engaging activity where you briefly review all of the learning that occurred in the content section. And this is something when we do our training observations that we often see as missing, because again, we're so excited about the content we have to share that we can kind of run out of time for some of those closing. But having that summary activity, really, number one, it helps your learners review. So it helps them re-engage with all of the material that you covered. It reinforces it and it makes it a lot more likely that they're going to remember what you've taught them. So with that, I will stop sharing and let's hear from you all.
Okay, so Sharon just talked about activating prior knowledge and that, you know, in the closing, reinforcing the content. And this goes for both online training and in-person training. How do you get people, you know, comfortable to share with each other, especially in a group that doesn't know each other? You know, sometimes you have groups that are just like all new hires and you have all this cricketing going on and you need them to be active and participate or the training isn't going to go well. So at the beginning, what do you do to build that emotional safety and comfort?
I'll go. I'll use something that is relatable to like the weather, or if there's a season for, you know, to open it, you know, welcome to blah, blah, blah training, and then tell them a little bit about myself and then ask them to introduce themselves. But give them a specific question to answer so that if they want to tell, they can. And you're going to know pretty quick the ones who want to share and the ones who don't.
Okay, thank you. So just be really relatable and something everyone. I usually get tasked with opening some of our trainers institutes, and I'm always like, where should I go to eat? You know, or what's the best restaurant in your area? Or where should I hike? Because that is relatable for everybody. Well, maybe not the hiking, but yeah. Thanks, Tammy. Other trainers, how do you make it all comfy?
I like to start my training, even if I know the exact number of people who are going to be in the training and everything. I like to kind of take a poll where they don't have to verbally answer anything, because almost anybody is comfortable raising their hand. Not everybody's comfortable speaking initially. So I try to ask questions like, how many people have been in the field for 1 year or less, 5 years or less, whatever, something like that. I try to make sure that they understand that I see them and I appreciate them. Early on in the beginnings of my trainings, I tend to do a lot of affirmations for the people in my training, regardless of what the content is. Like, I know that everybody in here cares about kids, or, I know that everybody in here is an expert, or, something like that, just to make them feel seen and appreciated by me. And it kind of helps them open up.
Thanks, Jasmine. Someone, I just missed it, said that they put in color pages. Who is it that offers coloring pages?
Danita.
Yeah.
And then she says a greet and meet game as well.
Okay.
I like to use learning personas. So like in the online trainings, having it can be a bit of a detachment because there's not an actual person there, but having like a learning persona that's a quote unquote trainer that's presenting the content, and maybe speaking some of the content as well, whether it's made after somebody like Sharon in some of the trainings, or if it's just a made up person that it's just a random avatar found off the internet. I like to use those. And then I also utilize plain language as much as possible. And one of the things with plain language is using like you a lot. And so just making things more relatable and more on, a person's level. Not so academic-y.
I was gonna say,
Academic.
I do welcome videos and like try to introduce myself, but I'll do it in video and not just as text, even in online courses. So you get to see somebody's face and hear their tone of voice, and you're not just reading something. I do that with my online, my regional group for FET. They get a video from me before we start FET where I introduce myself and say hello to them. So there is some of that person to person contact. And I think that also helps people feel more comfortable. Hey, there's actually a person there. I'm not just talking to a computer and clicking through.
That's really good, Julie. That's excellent. Can we what apps and what are you using to send your videos for your intro videos?
I use Loom, which I also use for my feedback on a lot of my assignments. The EDU version, I think you can do unlimited videos. I think there's some limitations if you don't have the EDU, but you could use YouTube because you know how to use YouTube and record a YouTube video and send the YouTube video. Or if you're comfortable in Zoom, log onto a call by yourself and just record yourself talking and then send them the video, or post it in an online course. But any of those 3 ways would work to record video. It doesn't have to be long. It could be a 2-minute video, but somebody took the time and you see a face and a person and get to hear them.
Okay. Sarah just said you could try weconnectcards.com. She said, I really love these cards for an activity with participants. They get to talk one with each other, and then they trade cards and move to another person. It gets them moving and opens people up to talking without making them talk in front of the room. It went
And
really
these
well
are the
for last training.
Chad Littlefield, I believe.
Yes,
It-
I did a
the-
training and it was so good. And it was before the pandemic, and I just found those cards again and I was like, I'm going to try this at my training, and it went so well. And I told them to give me honest feedback. I was like, let me know if this is uncomfortable. They were like, this was the most fun icebreaker we've ever done. So Yeah, and it really worked because we were going over social emotional stuff. So it tied in with my topic because we were doing connect the dots. So we were talking about the importance of connecting and how the content is important, but connecting to each other and to the presenter is also very important. So
Thanks, Sarah, for reminding us of that resource. I remember that and then I had forgotten. She did drop it in the chat if anyone wants to go over there and grab that resource so you can get it.
And we use that a lot. Bambi Cliff is actually, she's done a lot of really neat stuff with Chad's We Connect cards. So definitely reach out to your training coach if you're looking for something like that. And then Candace, there was also, Bethany had asked, I'm wondering how you get your audience motivated after lunch. The afternoon trainings get tricky to get the audience engaged. And Emily had suggested a stand up, sit down game, kind of get people moving, a would you rather game, which is a great suggestion. I didn't know if anybody else had any other suggestions for that one.
I always provide peppermints after lunch. Peppermints kind of wake you up a little bit. It's something cheap, and most people like peppermints.
Definitely take some planning for your activities after lunch. What do you guys do for your right after lunch? What is your go-to to keep them awake? Peppermints? I will come to your training.
I like to do movement activities of some sort, just depending on the venue. I might have to change them a little bit, but my favorite one is to do, you make 4 sets of matching pictures. So like 2 related things, like a spring tree and a fall tree. But on the back of the pictures, you put a specific movement and you show the audience the picture and they pick one or the other. And then whoever picked this has to do this, and whoever picked this has to do this. You make one of them kind of strenuous and one of them kind of easy. And then you do that with like 4 different sets of things. And it's really silly because people are like, oh my gosh, I hate tea. So they'll pick coffee, and it's really funny to watch them flip out over the pictures and then be sad when they chose the harder activity.
That sounds like really people don't need to go on a lunch walk if they know they're going to come in and that's fun.
I think
think
a
a
good
lot of
point
it-
she raised too was just making people laugh, especially when it's dragging in the afternoon. It gives me energy to laugh, even if I'm not getting up and running around necessarily. Just doing something that makes people engage a little and laugh a little instead of it being so content heavy the whole time.
I agree.
Yeah. And it also really depends on what your content is. And if you really need that laugh break, like if you really need to put something in there, some of you have some pretty heavy content.
I think regardless of your topic, and this is just a good training rule, period, is make it as interactive as possible. Don't lecture for large chunks of time. Do short bits and then draw the information you want out of the participants, whether they're evaluating something and you're pointing out what they should see, or you're asking questions to draw out the point. No knowledge dumps, but I mean, let's be honest, all of our attention spans probably got shorter during COVID because we got used to multitasking, and everyone has their devices out more and gets distracted easier. So the more interactive you can make it, just generally, that's going to be a good training, especially after lunch or first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
That's a perfect segue. Candace, should I move on to our final tip then?
Yeah, go ahead.
Julie, you teed this one up very well. Let me share. All right, are you all seeing that? So our final tip is really make sure that it's not just information, that you are having time for skill practice and debrief in your content section planning, as Julie said. And this helps with engagement, it helps with a sense of fun and involvement. But if you're not planning that skill practice and debriefing, chances are they're not going to remember a whole lot of what you've told them, because if they're just hearing information, that can be very boring for them. So make sure that you're planning the time for this. The other thing that it does is it helps you narrow your content, because if you're really planning those skill practices and time to debrief, you'll realize maybe that you can't plan quite as much content as you had thought. All right, so I will stop sharing and let's hear from you all.
Okay, so here's the big question. How do you find all these fun activities? How do you find and come up with these things?
Google.
Pinterest.
Sometimes I will literally just have a vague idea and I will just type random phrases into Pinterest or Google or YouTube until I find something that clicks and is what I want. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm searching for.
So you don't know what you want until you find it?
Sometimes.
Like me at the grocery store? Okay. Tammy, I see you nodding your head. Do you do that same thing?
I feel like that so many of us have so much in common and not even knowing each other. It's kind of funny. One thing that I like to do as a trainer is, whenever I first, when I was going through the EPI 2 years ago, it really resonated with me on adapting your material and your activities for adult learners. Like, I really think that I had ADD, ADHD, whatever in high school, and it was just never addressed. And so I try to put myself in the spot of where that adult person might be and think, oh, I don't want her to call on because I don't know that hard word that she's wanting me to read. And I may be getting a little bit too deep here, but I try to put myself in the other person's shoes and to let them know that I'm here to answer the questions that they have, and so that they can be better prepared to go back and do the training that they've been given. Does
So
that
you're
make
really, yeah, you're really touching on, just being safe to actually ask and get the instruction that they need.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, what did you tell me something that you learned or something that stuck out? And a lot of people will say something and I'm like, wow, that really resonated with them.
Yeah. And then when they talk, other people are like, yeah, me too. So yeah. Julie, do you Pinterest your ideas? Where do you get your ideas?
I don't Pinterest. As far as what I do, a lot of it's just kind of looking at, okay, what were my objectives? What do they have to practice when they get back? Now, how can I help them get to that? I mean, as far as summary kind of interactive activities, I love my Jeopardy labs. But a lot of it's just interactive. How can they practice what I want them to practice? I was going to say, I've been working on, I just gave a training, the one that I'm going to do at Trainers Institute at something else. And I'm working on a training on AI, and choice boards could be a way to do some practice time at the end and let people pick things that are relevant to them. So everybody isn't necessarily doing the same thing, but they can pick something that they like that's relevant to them and then share out, leave time for that. I've got it actually set up with preview a Variety Fun Day. You're going to pick a choice board and do some activities and then do a 2-minute news brief on how it went and for that particular thing. So there's like 9 options. So people could pick which thing they want to do. So they can pick something that's relevant and applicable to them.
Love that. Because you're not forcing me to do a word search. And I love that. Someone else might love it. But I think that's nice to go to what the people would like to do to review. That's really interesting.
A lot of times I teach at the center that I'm teaching at, and this is harder obviously to do online, but when I am at a center, for instance, with the Connect the Dots that we did a couple weeks ago, one of our activities was we went and crawled around on the floor in their classroom to look at how it looks from a child's perspective. And that they had so much fun with that. And then having them go to other people's classroom and then coming up with a plan for, oh, this artwork is way too high on the wall. I see what you're saying. It needs to come down. but like doing activities like that within their actual classrooms, when that's a possibility, if you're teaching at a center directly, is a really fun way to like have it apply specifically to their facility in the room they're in while you're teaching them the content. So that's been a really nice thing.
That's a really creative and fun way, and it's very memorable. They won't forget that.
We washed our hands afterwards.
Does anyone else have a question about activities? Or Dawn, you were going to say something?
I was just going to kind of goes along with the choice boards and the activities. I like to do with the online like application activities that are directly related to whatever it is that they've been learning. And so just having some sort of activity that they would do, and not necessarily meant to be overly complicated. Sometimes they might be, but they're not meant to be overly complicated. Just to be, ways to practice what you learn. So if it's a training on lesson planning, the application activity is going to have something to do with lesson planning in it.
You guys have so much to share. I want to give, we're coming up on time, but I want everyone who has a question, any question, to be able to throw it out there about activities and training plans and all of those things. Does anyone have, doesn't even have to be on the tip number 4. Does anyone have any questions or something that you put out that we missed in the chat even? Let's see. Oh, Dawn, you had said that PowerPoint has a video recording that you can export the document into a video. Okay.
Deb's had a great suggestion. She talked about brain breaks every 20 to 30 minutes that can also be used as transition activities. And then Deb, you described how to do elevator in the chat. Are you willing to talk us through that? Because it sounds like a really great energizer.
It probably needs to be shown how to do it, because I was trying to put it into words and I was like, this sounds really silly, doesn't it? But what I try to do with the brain breaks is just teach people things that I did in the classroom with the children, so they move their bodies. So I'm going to see if I can position this so I don't look too crazy. I'll just show you. I'm really old and I can still do this at age 64. So you get down and we're going to get on the elevator together. We're going up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Elevator open, elevator closed. We're going down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Elevator open, elevator closed. Then we're going to get off the elevator. You can just do lots of things that you do with children, do it with adults, and they enjoy it.
That's a good point, because maybe even sharing those activities would be something that's new that someone else hasn't seen that they can do in their class with their kids, even, So if you're training teachers and you show them a new activity like that, then you might be expanding their experience in a whole nother direction. So that's really nice. Thanks, Deb, for sharing that.
I know, I love that, because that's one too. You could do it sitting. If you had somebody with a mobility, you could just do the arms. There's a lot of different ways you could do that.
The tactile from rubbing your hands together is very helpful too. So you're doing a lot. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
One of the favorites that I do is we do a massage. So you form a line and you get people lined up behind each other. Maybe you've all seen this at other trainings, but you plant a flower. So you're digging gently into each other's backs, and then you're planting the seed, and they like to do that over and over again. That one is like, can we do that one again? Because you get a massage while you're at it.
Very fun. Very fun. You guys, we're almost out of time.
I was going to say we're going to move into our wrap up, I think, if that's okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we did. I did want to ask before, we have a couple of slides to share, that some upcoming activities. We also have some thank you slides, but before we do that, can we take about 30 seconds? And do you mind, if there was an idea that kind of resonated with you today, maybe something that you will use that we talked about, would you be willing to either unmute or just go ahead and put it in the chat? The Connect cards. So lots of some ideas and activities we're hearing from Shirley. Yeah. I know I'm going to use the elevator. Oh. The photo exercise from Jasmine. Yeah, Tammy said just being more intentional, and you know, hopefully we've all given each other some ideas about how we can be more intentional about our training planning. Right. Activity of the elevator. Right. Well, let me share very quickly and just share a couple of exciting things we have coming up. But first, we want to thank our expert trainers for taking the time and for being vulnerable and sharing your knowledge. So thank you to Tammy, Jasmine, Dawn, and Julie. We very much appreciate it. And then we just have 2 slides. We have a couple of things that we are very excited about. On Friday, April 12th, we have in Bowling Green the Friday Fun Day for trainers, and that we have 2 really fantastic face-to-face sessions with 3 hours of adult learning and also time for networking. So if you want to register, you can scan the code. I will also drop it in the chat. And then also coming up, May 6th through 10th is our Trainers Institute. We have lots of great national presenters if you need some adult learning hours. This will all be done live webinar. And then our next Trainers Connection is May 28th from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. So we will be sending you some information about that next month. And we thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for all your participation. This has been a really great session. The training coaches are going to stay on. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stay on. Otherwise, thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.